Hello everyone, Ben Lukes here. Thank you so much for watching today. In this video, I want to follow up on my previous video on challenging job interview questions by specifically looking at behavioural questions. Again, these are very common questions in interviews as they give employers the opportunity to find out how you have responded to particular behavioural situations. And like previous job interview questions we've discussed, these questions can be very challenging to discuss in detail, but honestly, if you get them right, you're really going to bolster your chances of being very successful in the job interview. So some examples of behavioural questions can include how have you responded when faced with a disagreement, or how have you managed a team in a leadership position. How you respond to these questions can really determine the outcome of the job interview, so let's have a look at how you can tackle those questions right now. So let's start by establishing some context here. Why do employers ask behavioural questions in job interviews? The reason is because these questions really give them an opportunity to find out, are you going to be a good cultural fit in this organisation? What are you like in terms of your workplace behaviour? Because obviously they have to go on what you've done previously and examples that you can provide as well in order to make that very important judgment call on their end. You'll be interested to know that actually some tech companies right now actually have a separate interview stage dedicated entirely to behavioural interview questions. So again, that really shows you the importance of getting these questions right. So what are the common categories of behavioural questions that often get asked in job interviews? You may find that behavioural questions actually focus on particular themes such as how you work in teams, how you handle failures and making mistakes, or how you work well under pressure. One of the great things you can do in order to prepare for behavioural questions is actually make a dot point list at home of some particular examples in your previous work experience or in your life in general where you've actually had to face some challenges or work in teams. Because if you can actually identify some examples that really stand out and how you overcome those challenges or worked well together in a team, that can really help you in terms of formulating your answers when you actually go into the job interview itself. Probably the first piece of advice I can give to you regarding behavioural interview questions is to be specific. When you answer behavioural interview questions, make sure you specifically outline what happened, when it occurred, what you did, what the resolution was as well. You've got to think of these behavioural questions like a bit of a checklist, whereby the employer just wants to tick off all the pieces of information that they need to know in order to make a decision about whether you are going to be a good candidate. And the truth is, the job interviewer may have multiple behavioural questions to get through in a job interview. So if you can save them the trouble of having to ask you follow-up questions, that's going to make things so much smoother for them and also build your case as well. Following on from my previous point, the next thing I wanted to suggest is think about how you structure the answers to your question. Of course, like I said, you've got to be really specific in your answer, but if you can also follow a certain formula when responding to behavioural questions, you really increase your chances of being seen in a positive light by the potential employer. Generally speaking, a great structure to follow is to describe what happened, what was the challenge, what you did, and what the resolution was. If you can focus on those four key things in your answer, again, you really help the employer in terms of going through that checklist in terms of behavioural interview questions and really ensuring that you put your best foot forward when answering these questions. The final point I want to make in this video is to practice, practice, practice. Again, this comes down to the fundamentals of job interview success because the truth is behavioural questions really require a lot of practice in order to get right before going into the interview. So by all means, find a friend or a family member who can actually test you up some behavioural questions, or just practice yourself based on the dot point list of examples that you have prepared earlier. The most important thing to remember is that when sitting in a job interview, behavioural questions can often come thick and fast, especially if you've got a panel interview to sit through as well. So you really need to be on your toes and be at the very top of your game in order to succeed when answering behavioural interview questions. The more you can practice prior to the interview, the better the chance you have of succeeding in that job interview. So now that we've discussed some key tips for how to succeed when answering behavioural interview questions, I want to include some bonus material just covering my own personal examples of some common behavioural interview questions I get asked and how I've responded as well. So while I will keep the companies anonymous, I really hope that this material gives you a bit of an understanding and some insight as to how to respond to these very important questions. So one of the most common behavioural interview questions that I get asked in job interviews is, describe a time when you had to solve a major problem within an organisation that you worked for. The example I often referred to is that when I became the marketing manager for a particular company, I was told that the management team did not have any visibility over how the current marketing efforts were contributing to the generation of sales leads for the sales team. Now, at the time, the business did have a customer relationship management system or CRM system installed within the organisation, but the CRM system was just not giving them the information that they needed, and they're at the point where they were actually considering replacing the entire CRM system. But I said to them, let's have a look a little bit further and see if there are any underlying issues that may be contributing to the problem that you are facing. So I did some further investigations and I actually found out that the individual sales team members were using the CRM system in different ways. And because of that, the actual information for the leads that the marketing team were generating at the time were not being kept up to date in the one centralised location. So in order to overcome the problem, what I did was prepare a new workflow for the sales team to follow, whereby all the leads that marketing were generating would be updated within the one centralised CRM platform. And I made sure that the workflow was as easy as possible for the individual sales team members to adopt. By then training the sales team members about how to use the new workflow, we were able to solve the underlying problem and management were able to get the visibility they needed and see the connection between the marketing efforts and the sales lead generation. A second question I often get asked in behavioural interviews is, when did you have a disagreement with your colleague and how did you overcome it? The example I often use is when we had a discussion with the sales team about the online inquiry form for a company's website. See, the sales team were concerned that the online form was not capturing the country that the particular customer was actually based in when submitting an inquiry. Now, their thinking at the time was that we should probably expand the online form to include either a drop-down menu where they could select the country from a drop-down list, or alternatively give an extra text field where the customer could enter their country of origin. But I actually disagreed with the idea because I didn't really want to make the online form any longer or make it more difficult for customers to fill in the online form. So in this instance, I actually referred to an idea that Stephen R. Covey mentioned in his book, The Third Alternative. And the idea is that whenever you face a disagreement with a colleague or another team member, one thing to consider is what the third alternative is. So look beyond the either or option and find another win-win solution that actually could be workable in the situation. So in this instance, what I did was have a look at another online form platform, and that form platform actually enabled us to capture the country of origin of the prospective customer automatically in the background without them having to manually enter that information into the form. So that third alternative was the solution we needed to overcome the disagreement. The sales team were able to see the country of origin data they needed, and I was able to ensure that the online form remained as easy as possible and simple for the prospective customer to complete. The final example I wanted to provide is, describe a time where you've had to earn a team's trust. I often think back to when I became a manager for the first time, because in that situation I was still very young at the time and all the colleagues within that team I was leading were actually older than me. So I knew from the get-go that I had to earn their trust as quickly as possible so that they would have confidence in my leadership moving forward. And how I did that was by setting up individual one-on-one meetings with each of the team members to explore with them how they liked to be managed, how their work was going, what challenges they were facing at the time in their roles. And by establishing that open and transparent communication up front, I was able to break down any barriers that prevented us from moving forward together in a trusting relationship. And by then maintaining that open and clear communication with each of them and with the team as a whole in the weeks and months ahead, I was able to build that level of trust between myself as a manager and also my team as well. I really hope today's video has given you some great insights on how to respond to behavioural interview questions. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel today to stay tuned for further updates on about how to perform well in job interviews. Don't forget to like and leave a comment below, and definitely stay tuned for the next video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you again soon.